Toto Wolff is eyeing up Max Verstappen, sure, but he's also quietly moulding the 2026 grid into something of his own image. And oddly enough, it all starts with Checo. This all kicked off with a report yesterday from Auto Evolution's Ed Spencer, claiming that Sergio Perez had signed with Cadillac with an announcement due within the next few weeks, possibly after the Hungarian Grand Prix, and during the summer break. The perfect midsummer teaser. Well, so much for that then. I was looking forward to maybe taking a break throughout August. Thanks for that, Ed. Also, I did check in with Ed and asked what his source was, and apparently it's someone close to Checo's manager, so that does sound a lot more robust than many things I've seen on Reddit where you hear from Checo's sponsor's best friend's caterer that maybe he might be announcing his retirement, which ultimately turns out not to happen. Quelle surprise. Then, of course, you've got journalist Sergio Rodriguez doing what he does with his flag emojis, which usually tend to be pretty accurate, saying that, yes, Perez is headed toward Cadillac, so there is someone else saying this too. Unfinished business and the like, and this is not the main crux of this video. There is more to this involving Toto. And you know what? I'm really happy for Sergio that he might be getting a second chance akin to what Nico Hülkenberg got, and look what he's doing. He's doing great guns. It's absolutely gravy for the German. The same thing could apply to Sergio, now once again potentially becoming a team leader for a brand new team, an underdog. Yes, Checo has been very much dragged over the coals by many people thanks to Helmut Marko's comments and Red Bull not heeding his warnings, us finding out later, and then us all feeling pretty bad about it in the European market. Because had he been heard, Red Bull would still be dominant, I reckon, and he would still be in a job. Anyway, that is not the main topic for today. Because whilst Max Verstappen is very happy for Sergio and him getting maybe an opportunity with Cadillac, it's all the stuff surrounding the Mexican driver which is piquing my interest today. Because according to that same article from Spencer, there are now only 2 candidates left throughout proceedings, that being Valtteri Bottas and Mick Schumacher. The reason why I find this particularly intriguing is that Toto Wolff's influence on the grid is now expanding to more than just George, Kimi and Max. It's now including 2 drivers, these 2 candidates for that second seat, who have been within his sphere of influence in the past, or still are. Now, granted, I know that many of you will be arguing, well, wait a minute, Mick's not part of the Mercedes fold anymore. He left of his own volition, so Toto doesn't have any influence on him anymore. That may be true. But I can easily still imagine that he has a soft spot, Toto, for Mick. There weren't many plans for him before, well, Kimi Antonelli came along. And the reason why he did leave Mercedes was for a good reason, to fully focus on his World Endurance campaign with Alpine, and look how that's turned out. Him turning out to be the fastest Alpine wet driver by at least half a second in some races, and toward the sharp end of all of the hypercar drivers. So there is something going on with this German. He's definitely loving endurance racing at the very least. If this doesn't work out with Cadillac, oh, he's got a good motorsporting career ahead of him. Toto would have probably kept Mick in that reserve role at Mercedes for as long as he wanted. Really, it was theirs for him to take. But again, with Kimi Antonelli, it was really going to become clear there was not going to be any room for Mick Schumacher at that team. Had he remained there, Kimi would have been taking the centre stage, and then with all of these Max talks, there'd be even less chance of Mick getting a seat. So it would have been absolutely pointless, although it is nice to be able to represent Brackley in some shape or form and actually provide a good service, because I still stand to this day. His work in the simulator helped Mercedes get that double podium in Spain 2023 when it was becoming very clear the W14 wasn't going to be the answer to their problems with the W13. It was going to be a year of pain. And that weekend was a very big bonus and very much needed for overall morale. One thing throughout all of this I've noticed with Toto is that he really does hesitate when it comes to brand new young talent. He's not sure where to put them or what to do with them, and he usually ends up with them getting away. Max was one of them, and I believe the most recent example was Paul Aron, because Mercedes reportedly wanted Aron to stay in F3 for 2024, maybe to avoid clashing with Antonelli in F2, so that means Mercedes could focus solely on the Italian. Aron did not subscribe to that. He moved up to F2 with high-tech, thrived there, finishing ahead of Kimi in the standings. Coincidence? Or a warning sign? To be fair to Kimi, Prema really did drop the ball when it came to setting up the brand new F2 car, but many people will forget that in time and look to the statistics and see Aron ahead of Antonelli, therefore Paul is better. Regardless, last year, Toto had a plan, and it was to put Kimi in the car. And we might be seeing a really elaborate one, his most elaborate one yet, for Wolff to get all of the drivers that he has an interest in into the relevant seats that they need to be put in, or that they want to be put in, and then of course trying to get Max Verstappen on the second time of asking. Yeah, that's a given. That we all know that's going to happen after him and that boat in Sardinia. So he's got a lot of chess pieces, so he's got a lot of things going on right now with potentially 5 drivers he's in discussions with. That's nigh on a quarter of next year's grid at the whims and wants of the Austrian team principal of Mercedes. That's absolutely crazy. Now, I discussed not long ago the scenario where Kimi Antonelli, not George Russell, would be removed from the works team to take up a role potentially at Alpine as part of their welcome package for becoming a Mercedes engine customer. Whilst this is an unlikely scenario, I still consider this as some sort of an option, especially considering that, as of late, Kimi has had a very rough time of it, the Canadian Grand Prix being the only plus in an otherwise negative situation that has befallen him since, funnily enough, his home race around Imola. Has the pressure gotten to Antonelli? Well, maybe. Mercedes are certainly in a lot better position than they were last year, when they were very much a distant fourth, the bottom of the front runners. Now, they are very much in contention for best of the rest, what with George Russell's turn of form as the team leader, and Kimi Antonelli putting in a stonking effort at the beginning of the season. Lately, though, it's certainly fallen off a little bit, with Antonelli himself saying that nothing's really working, and that there are far too many zeros scored. He knows there's something wrong here, he wants to make it better, but right now, it's simply not clicking. I feel bad for the kid, I really do. He's certainly put in a really valiant effort, but right now, he is certainly struggling. And right now, it might mean that Toto faces a critical choice as to what to do with Kimi in his second season. Does he maintain the status quo and keep George there, who he knows is a benevolent force for the Italian, so completely ignoring Max, or maybe take the punt in bringing in Max Verstappen to become his brand new mentor for next year? Or maybe keep George, get Max, and send Kimi off to a relatively backmarker midfield team where there is far less scrutiny and far less media pressure for a couple of years, or maybe just one, and then he can come back again. We have seen this before in the past. Felipe Massa at Sauber in 2002, anyone? He took a year out, spent that year with Ferrari as part of their testing program, came back to Sauber in 2004, turned out to be pretty good, and then he got called up to Ferrari, where he raced for several years. And Verstappen's public support for Kimi does complicate matters for Toto a little bit, because Max has got no problem with Antonelli, and whatever happens, Toto's got to really make the right call. But yes, Antonelli's struggles are very much undeniable. However, if Toto decides to go with a Max-Kimi lineup, Bottas can easily step in and provide Alpine that good understanding of Mercedes power plants, but like I said in that Kimi video, they would be losing Mercedes, a very experienced simulator runner and fan favourite at a time when the sport is going through its biggest change in decades, if not ever. But that being said, there have been talks which makes this foam of thought all the more compelling. As we've been fixated with Max and George talk, the talk around Valtteri had been relatively unrecognised until recently, where both Valtteri and Toto confirmed that there have been talks in discussion, with Valtteri saying when asked about talks with Briatore, he went, "Yeah, you could say that." And he is not resistant at all for Valtteri going over to Alpine, as said right here, for your consideration. Ahem. They've talked a few times, actually. I saw Briatore today, and we talked about Valtteri. It seems that the interest in Valtteri is increasing even more. He deserves that seat. If someone grabs him as a race driver, we'll let him go. Of course with a tear in the corner of our eye. Ultimately, I give him advice as a friend. Valtteri ultimately makes the choice with his management. I try to stay in the background. Nice try, sir, nice try. You say you're in the background, yet you're the one telling us all that he and Flavio have been talking a few times? That's not background behaviour, my friend. If it really were, then we wouldn't have heard you talking about it. Once again, Wolff is acting like an informal broker or something who can release Bottas from his reserve deal with little issue or resistance. Sure, he'd be sad to see him go and would lose valuable experience, it's why he brought him back in from the cold last year, but it would keep Alpine sweet before their Mercedes engine supply begins. Also, Alpine could stand to gain from potentially some other little perks maybe, like a subsidised salary, akin to what Ferrari gets for Haas with them hosting their academy graduates, or maybe some kind of discount on the power units or something for running a Mercedes-backed driver. That could easily also apply to Kimi Antonelli, but it all really depends on who stays and who goes at Mercedes. But if Bottas is most likely to be getting that seat instead of Antonelli, then they would be gaining a fairly good driver and certainly a fan favourite like I mentioned earlier. And as we all know, Alpine could really stand to gain some more fans, or if any fans. So yeah, even though Toto's claiming he's not steering negotiations, oh, he so totally is. Even if he doesn't have a formal managerial connection to Valtteri anymore. Also, you gotta remember here that now that Christian Horner is out of the Red Bull job, Toto Wolff is now by far the most senior and influential team principal on the grid right now. I'm seriously talking by a considerable amount. Most of the team principals have only been around for like 3 or 4 seasons. Toto, he's been around for 12 plus. And sure, you might be arguing, well, Briatore's got plenty of his own experience, but he's technically not a team principal, even though he's acting like a team principal. But like I mentioned yesterday, he surely doesn't want to be doing this on the daily. He'll probably want to bring someone else, maybe Christian Horner. But I can imagine Toto and Flavio treating each other with respect and these talks being pretty serious, and also quite cordial. That is until maybe Horner is confirmed, and then means Toto and Christian would have to be dealing with each other, being team principals and all that, but for the same side? It's looking incredibly strange, but also very interesting, and people would certainly like the intriguing drama of the will they, won't they thing. And also, Alpine is looking incredibly prone right now. You very much get the feeling that they are going to be saying to Mercedes, "Take me, Mercedes, take me as I am, and do with me as you want." Because despite Mercedes having 4 teams in F1 with their engines in the back of them, he doesn't necessarily, Toto, wield as much influence as you might think in regards to placing drivers. Williams and McLaren, they got their own thing going on, having no time or room for Wolff's wishes. Alpine, though, they would make for a good B team, like what Haas and Ferrari have presently. In time, perhaps Wolff could have a team ready to go to place up-and-coming junior drivers within his own academy. Say, for example, their current F3 pilot Noah Stromstead, if he does really well in that championship and then does really well in F2, then maybe Toto would have a call after Bottas retires in a couple of years and say, "Ah yes, Noah, you know what? I got a car for you." Now, I know what you're going to be saying next. Wait a minute, the Alpine Academy would like to say something about that. What about the likes of Kush Miney, Paul Aaron, interesting thing because of the connection with Mercedes, and then Franco Colapinto, because if Colapinto loses his seat to Bottas, he surely would be bumped back to being a reserve driver, and then maybe gets the call back up again in 27 if Pierre Gasly decides to go somewhere else. That is very much true, and I will get the foam of doubt out for this one and the spanner of speculation, but it really wouldn't surprise me if the Renault Group, in order to try and save even more money, would just completely shutter the Alpine Academy, because you really get the sense that if anyone's in that academy, are they really going to be getting a position on the grid right now with Briatore's vision and their desire to get cozy with Mercedes? No. So I'm very much thinking that the Alpine Academy might not be long for this world, or it might be merged into the Mercedes Junior team, or the Mercedes Junior team gets first dibs, to maybe get an even bigger discount. Because one thing is absolutely clear to me, Mercedes do not want to be in a position like they were a decade ago when they lost out with Max, in not having an immediate conduit into Formula 1 like Red Bull had with Toro Rosso. In this case, Alpine could be the conduit for Mercedes, like Williams used to be. So as you can probably gather from this video, Toto Wolff is, to coin a rather contentious term, playing 4D or even 5D chess. If it were up to me though, I would stick with the 2 guys he's already got since they're doing well enough together and are consistent, with Russell proving more than capable of being a team leader and an easy championship candidate for next year, on top of being a dark horse this year, poised to snatch P3 in the standings from a beleaguered Red Bull driving Verstappen. But as you can probably tell, I am not Toto. Even though I try and fail sometimes to mimic his Austrian accent, it's very clear to me that he has got multiple spinning plates on the go right now. One of them could easily break. He's certainly playing the game. But playing the game doesn't necessarily mean you are going to win said game. He could easily lose out. But again, to be fair, if he did lose out, he would still have George and Kimi on his book, so it's not exactly the worst outcome in the world now, is it? That's 4 obvious dominoes that Toto is lining up to then flick down in a very satisfying way, saying, "Ah, good, perfect." Because come off it, Toto is very much making good use of the fact that Alpine are looking rather submissive at the moment. Very, very très un bon at the moment there. Je plaisante. J'étudie le français depuis l'âge de 4 ans. As a result, throughout all of this assorting of races, I believe this could leave the door open for Mick Schumacher to take up the second Cadillac seat, even though he would, according to the original Auto Evolution piece, be the team's second choice for that seat next to Checo. Even though he would be coming with his own perks and a good experience of the Ferrari Drive Academy and its power units, But yes, Perez is expected to take the first seat. And with Max already sort of congratulating him and saying that he'd be a good fit for Cadillac, yeah, it's a done deal. It's paddock gossip right now, we're just not privy to it yet. You might be thinking that Cadillac would be losing out on 2 veterans. This would be a really good opportunity for this team in their debut year, but I don't think that was part of the plan to begin with. Mario Andretti, the chief scout for Cadillac, has always been saying that in his ideal lineup, he would want 1 veteran alongside a younger talent. Doesn't necessarily have to be a rookie, but someone at least in their 20s. Mick would fit that bill. And also, I think Wolff wants to try and get their relationship with Cadillac as a fellow team member in Formula 1 off onto a good note, because it did get off to a very bumpy start, very awkward, when he said that once Cadillac got their submission confirmed, that, oh, the anti-dilution fee was not good enough and that they weren't getting enough money. Yeah, that's not exactly the most warming of words to say to a brand new team, is it, Wolff? So maybe now, with them being confirmed to this team, Mercedes and Toto might want to make amends. So helping Cadillac land a rather marketable German driver would be a very good way in rebuilding relationships and also give Schumacher a seat without compromising one of their own seats, Mercedes. And also thanking Mick for his services for those 2 years, that it all ultimately worked out in the end. So yeah, don't expect Wolff to be in the background with this one either. Even though Mick is no longer associated with Mercedes, I'm pretty sure that Wolff might have something to say about it. Because having 2 drivers that are somewhat loyal to him at 2 different teams would be a rather nice perk to have. And if you might be wondering about Zhou Guanyu, then I could easily see a situation where he becomes a reserve driver for both Cadillac and Ferrari. We saw this happen with Antonio Giovinazzi and Mick Schumacher in 2022. They both shared the duty of being Ferrari's 3rd driver, so we might get a situation there, where there could be an opportunity for Zhou at 2 teams. So a Mick Schumacher and Sergio Perez debut lineup for Cadillac, I would say that's a pretty sweet one, and also a drama-free one. Because as I said in my Mick video on Cadillac rumours a while back, him being back in the room, his management team are framing the German driver as a blue-collar racer, who is more than willing to put in the hours and the graft to ensure that whatever team he works with gets the best out of him. Total commitment. Sure, they might not be saying his management team that he is the fastest driver out there, but if you want someone who's dedicated to the cause and getting you up to speed in your first season, then Mick's your guy. And I really don't want to bring Michael into this because Mick is his own man, but the work ethic instilled in this guy, it's incredible, remarkable, and something I highly rate. Toto still champions Mick in terms of being a good simulator driver, saying that he has a super advantage in that regard, and that any team would be missing out on his services should they not take it. Cadillac is a new team, and they would ideally like drivers who have experience within a world champion team, Mercedes and Red Bull. 2 of them. 2 of the biggest forces in the last 2 decades. And also, Mario Andretti has not only been speaking warmly about Mick Schumacher since the contract negotiation rumours have been burbling around, he's been championing Mick Schumacher since he got sacked from Haas. There's an article going back to the beginning of 2023 when he was talking about Mick's talents and how they just don't simply go away, him already realising and sussing out that something was weird at Haas that was really masking Mick's true potential. And this is coming from a storied world champion in both Formula 1 and stateside. He's been keeping an eye on Mick for that long. That's something to consider here. We've also got to take into account the world endurance angle because Cadillac and Alpine have been competing in that series, and in some cases, fairly often, Alpine have been beating Cadillac with their Jota-backed division. And with Mick getting some really good times there, I don't think Andretti's been ignoring that. I'm pretty sure that's been a topic of discussion. You might be arguing that Bottas can offer the same thing, an experience of a world champion team and proven racing experience having won 10 races, but Mick has something that Valtteri doesn't have, current racing pedigree, because Valtteri right now has been on the sidelines, and that angle was used at Alfa Romeo and Sauber, and look how that turned out. It wasn't really utilised at all, because there were so many shenanigans going on behind the scenes, and Bottas himself viewed the entire experience of being at Hinwil as a mistake. He got in at the wrong time, except maybe for the first half of 2022. That was looking pretty good. Once Fred Vasseur left... And sure, Bottas is a really well-known driver and has plenty of fans, but the Schumacher name is still incredibly relevant, and also Cadillac would stand to gain a lot of fans for being the team that gave Mick another go. Then bringing him back into Formula 1, and for him to correct the mistakes and having his own revenge arc. And you know me and revenge arcs, for better or worse. So okay, if Sergio and Mick do end up being teammates, would they get along? Well, I think so. I think certainly a lot more harmoniously than maybe a Sergio Valtteri lineup, because they have come to blows in the past. Why am I so confident about this? Well, look no further to when Mick posted on Instagram that Abu Dhabi 2022 would be his final race in F1. Checo commented this. Need I say more? Yeah, I think they've got a similar axe to grind. They were dragged through the mud by their respective teams, and they are here to correct a mistake. Unfinished business. They're determined to prove people wrong, and that they are ultimately worthy of being in Formula One and forging out their destinies in that sport on their own terms. It would certainly be a lot more cordial relationship than I think a Bottas-Perez lineup would be. It would also be politically safe, because you've got to be thinking about this from this perspective, that, okay, if you've got Valtteri and Checo in together at the same team, a brand new team, they're both similar age, they were both the number 2 drivers at their respective teams, and now they have the opportunity to be number 1. Can you imagine how that will turn out? Not a very good scenario unless it's very heavily policed by the team, by Cadillac, but they do lack experience. Even though they have some very good names in their arsenal, I could easily see a situation where Sergio and Valtteri, if they end up having a pretty good car and is somewhat competitive, vying for some sort of number 1 status like we're seeing with Carlos and Alex at Williams in a way, albeit very much tempered by the experience of Vowles, and them also wanting to get a storied team back up to the top. They are not quite as political, whereas with Bottas and Perez, I can easily see them being slightly more political. Whereas with Mick Schumacher, he is very much savvy in being a supportive role, because you've only got to look at what he's doing at World Endurance. You can't look out for number 1. You are part of a 3-man squad in your particular car. You have to learn the importance of teamwork to make the dream work. And also, he's got 2 years of experience within the Mercedes simulator and being the reserve driver, working for the greater good of the team. I think Mick would be a really good foil to Sergio Perez in his own quest to have a really good comeback like Nico Hülkenberg did. It's proven that older drivers can come back and be just as good with a team that is simply gelling with them better. And eventually, Mick could become the team leader once Sergio goes, okay, I've proven what I wanted to prove, I'm going to call it a day, but I get to choose when I call it a day. So yes, Cadillac really need a team with flexible attitudes, and even though Valtteri may claim that he'll get along with Checo, I have more doubts about that than I would if Mick and Checo were together. So yes, amidst all of that, Toto has got a very impressive but rather precarious juggling act going on. Because not only is he trying to nudge Bottas into Alpine, he's trying also to woo Max Verstappen secretly, but then not so secretly because Twitter, thanks for that, and the jet updates, but then also having to navigate a really embattled George Russell because he's trying to be the team leader, and he's got a car which is actually pretty good and is in line for 2nd place, and he's also now not sure about whether his efforts will be worth it or not, or whether he'll have a future with that team. I really feel for George at the moment, but at the same time, you've got Kimi Antonelli hearing about his promotion being considered a high risk, and him not exactly having a good phase of Formula 1 at the moment, so he's feeling a bit beleaguered too. And then again, adding Max into the mix, and Toto's using all of this chaos to destabilize Red Bull into sending them into the shadow realm for good, that meaning Red Bull are completely and utterly obliterated. But then Toto might be thinking, yes, I won, but at what costs? That driving force to do better, Red Bull, that's gone. You got to look for McLaren or Ferrari or something. There are so many drivers that are at the mercy of the Austrian right now. Mick does have some connection though, but I think he'll win out of this one, so he'll just slip in unnoticed. Wait, is that all you've got to say about George? You barely touched upon him. What about him? Well, I could yap on about the lad too, but we'd be here forever. To find out what I think George could do and why I think he's very much in play with Aston Martin instead of the whole Red Bull driver swap thing, watch this video next, straight after this one.